Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has accused opposition leader Peter Dutton of playing games over the upcoming Voice referendum. He says that claims for more detail are disingenuous. We're joining me now live after yesterday's historic announcement on the wording of the referendum is the supporter of the Voice Liberal MP for Berowra, Julian Leeser. Julian, really appreciate your time. Thanks very much for joining us here on the program. The announcement of the words of the referendum voice question, a fairly emotion-charged event. Do you share this view that it was a historic day for Australia's Indigenous population?
Look, I think it was an important day in the context of the discussion about having a referendum on the voice, because this was the day that the Prime Minister released his words that he wants to put to the Australian people later this year. This was the third version of the words that he has put out publicly. He put forward a version at Garma. He put forward an amendment to that version in a letter that he wrote to Peter Dutton in January, and now this is the third form of words. So it was important to see what those words are, because they are the words that the government is going to put into a bill that will be introduced into the Parliament next week.
Do you support the wording?
Look, we as the opposition have come to this with an open mind, and we've been trying to work through the issues and ask questions. But I am concerned about the fact that a number of the government's key legal advisors, Professor Greg Craven, a prominent constitutional lawyer, is raising serious questions about the role of executive government in these words. We know that the Solicitor General of the Commonwealth, Dr Stephen Donoghue KC, went to the referendum working group with an alternative form of words, that he had raised questions about that. It's also apparent that the government has failed to adopt the form of words that Dr Donoghue had suggested. We've been calling on the government to release the advice of the Solicitor General and any other legal advice that they've had on this matter, because it's important that Australians are able to read and assess that legal advice in order to make an informed decision at a referendum.
The Prime Minister mentioned you this morning, and he says that he's spoken to Peter Dutton about the Voice referendum 6 times. Mr Dutton's now attended 2 meetings of the working group. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said this morning, and I'd be keen to get your response to it.
Peter Dutton needs to get real about this. This isn't about him and it's not about me. This is about whether we are a better country. No matter how much detail is put out, Peter Dutton will say, oh, what about more detail? That's the game that's being played here.
So, Mr Leeser, what will it take for Peter Dutton to reach a position on this, and what's your response to the Prime Minister?
Well, I dispute what the Prime Minister's had to say. I mean, Peter Dutton has approached this issue in good faith. Right from the very start, he said he came to this with an open mind. His very first press conference as Leader of the Opposition, but he wanted to see the detail. And all through last year, we were asking the government for detail about how this body would work, what it would do, how it would change people's lives on the ground, and we weren't getting any of that detail. And then on the 28th of December, in the Christmas New Year period, the Prime Minister announced we'd be having a referendum this year at a music festival. And the Minister for Indigenous Australians said on the 1st of January that we'd have legislation in March for a referendum in August. That's why Peter Dutton wrote with his 15 questions to the Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister has never responded to answer those 15 questions. What can you do but answer questions and try to work through issues? And I think it's disingenuous of the Prime Minister to attack Mr Dutton in relation to this. We have genuinely tried to work through these issues. This is the Prime Minister's timetable, this is the Prime Minister's words, this is the Prime Minister's referendum. And look, I am sad that it's got to this point. I would have liked to have seen the Prime Minister engage in the reasonable questions that Australians have been asking Peter and myself, which form the basis of the questions he put there. And now there have been legal issues raised about the Prime Minister's words he says that he's not really interested in changing. So, the Prime Minister needs to show some flexibility here in relation to this issue and to answer the real questions that Australians are asking and release the Solicitor General's advice so Australians can understand what are the issues in these words.
So, Mr Leeser, I want to pull this up on the screen for our viewers. This is the wording that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is proposing now for the referendum, a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? So what, if any, issue do you have with that wording?
So that, I think, is the wording. I can't see your screen from where I am, but it sounds like you read me the question that will be on the ballot paper rather than the amendment to the Constitution. Yes. The question on the ballot paper is the long title of the bill and doesn't have any legal effect. The issue is the words that will go into the Constitution and what those words mean. Those words need to be subjected to proper legal scrutiny. And there has been no processes. We've been calling for proper processes right from the start. So this Parliamentary Joint Committee will be the first process that puts into place any sort of scrutiny on the words or the proposal that's gone forward. And it's important that lawyers appear before the committee and test the wording that is there, so that Australians can understand the effect, because words in the Constitution, just let me finish this point, Simon, are ultimately subject to the interpretation by the High Court. And we as Australians need to understand the effect of putting these new words into our Constitution.
So to be clear, and I appreciate you clearing that up for me in terms of the wording, the obvious what will be inserted into the Constitution needs a bit more thought, you say, but what is your thought on what that question I just read out that will be on the ballot paper, just as a question?
Well, the question on the ballot paper needs to describe the bill that is there, and that's the long title to the bill. I mean, I know that long title will be subjected to the committee process as well. And in the Republic referendum in 1999, I remember that Republican advocates tried to remove the words Republican President from the question because they were concerned that the people wouldn't vote for it if they saw those words on the ballot paper. I think if advocates decided to remove the words voice from the question, I think that would be a cause of concern. But, you know, I don't want to express a concluded view on those words, because I want to see what the committee does and what people say at the committee about those words. But what we should see is the Solicitor General's legal advice about what the words going into the Constitution actually mean.
No, it's a fair point. Mr. Leeser, finally, the Nationals have already said that they'll oppose the referendum question. Does the Coalition risk being on the wrong side of history on this, much in the same way that it suffered for its position on climate change before the last election?
No, look, the National Party have made their decision last year, and I respect the decision that they've made. We in the Liberal Party have not yet made our decision. It will go through normal, proper party room processes. But what we've sought to do is to come to this with an open mind and to ask reasonable questions that Australians are asking about how this body will work. And now we're going to subject the words that have been put forward to be put into the Constitution to a similar degree of scrutiny.
Well, Julian Leeser, I really appreciate your time. I'm sure we could talk about this for many more hours, and there'll be all sorts of debate over the coming days and weeks, but do appreciate you coming on the program. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.